Hey guys, welcome to the Omnipresence podcast. My name's Jack Tucker. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode 2, and it's a conversation I had with a wonderful woman local to me called Claire Wallerstein, who is an integral part of a environmental group called Rame Peninsula Beach Care, and they do amazing work clearing up a section of the Cornwall coastline, dragging just so much plastic you wouldn't believe off the beach. They do amazing stuff. She's an ex-BBC journalist. She's so lovely. As soon as we met, I just felt she's just a great person, and we had a really lovely conversation. I know you're going to enjoy it. I got a lot out of it, I know that, and unfortunately at 12 minutes my camera stopped recording, and I didn't realise that DSLRs can only record up to 12 minutes at a time. It's a limit, so unfortunately after 12 minutes there's no video. However, the audio is all good, so no worries there. It's a podcast, so if you're on YouTube, sorry. If you're on iTunes, thanks a lot. If you're on iTunes and you like it and you like the content, give us a review. Let us know how to make it better. We're all new to this, so yeah, thanks very much and enjoy. God bless.
Yeah, after I went to uni, I worked as a journalist for a while, and then I ended up going and living in the Philippines for 3.5 years.
Wow.
I was stringing for The Guardian and the BBC World Service, and then I was in Venezuela, and then was in London for a little bit, and then ended up in Spain. So I feel like my understanding of the UK or England is really limited, which really came home to me after Brexit vote, because I think it probably did to a lot of people. But when I've been abroad, people are always fascinated and ask me so much about what's it like in England, what do British people think about this and that.
Yeah.
And I realised that I have no idea, because I'm basing all my answers just on this little pocket, which is really very, very unusual. And
here?
Yeah.
Oh, right. You haven't lived... This is where you're from, is it?
This is where I'm from, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
So I grew up in Kingsand.
Yeah.
So my parents moved here in the early 60s, so they were a couple of first incomers.
Wow.
And then, it was pretty bleak in Kingsand in the 80s, and I left when I was 18, and I wanted to have something really different and really urban and gritty and just like a totally different experience. So I went to Bradford University.
Yeah.
And I lived out there for 5 years. And I'm glad I did, because that's probably the only experience I've really had of anything apart from this or London, and I wouldn't have known that any place like this was part of the same island.
Contrast, isn't it? Bradford with here.
Yeah. Learned to like curry a lot. It was brilliant. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I loved it, and I love the people up there. It just seems like a distant dream now, But I'm just really happy to be back here again.
Yeah.
Had all those great times abroad, but then I think because we had small children, and I just realised I wanted them to have the same kind of upbringing I'd had in the same place. So we came back.
Awesome. From the Philippines to here?
From Spain to here.
Oh, from Spain.
Yeah.
Cool. So how did you get into the beach cleaning? Have you always have you always had like a relationship with Whitsand, obviously being from around here?
Of course. I mean, we used to spend every day. We never had any holidays when I was a kid. I mean, it was every day down at Freethiel or Tregenhawk. And in my mind, I mean, maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe I just didn't notice the plastic. But in my memory, all those times, all those sunny days, it was all playing with driftwood and shells and bits of sea glass and stuff. And
so there was glass back then?
Yeah. There was an old fisherman actually in the village that he was like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. He was called Jim Kingdon, and he would take all of us kids down on the beach, and he was just like brilliant at finding the blue glass from the poison bottles.
Yeah. And
that was like our proper treasure. I mean, now you're lucky if you can find any glass at all, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's all been
I've heard
picked
that
up.
blue glass is like the one to find.
Yeah. And
but of course glass is actually sand, isn't it? So it's somewhat more it's like more inert to
it doesn't
nature,
have the
isn't it?
environmental impact that plastic does. I mean, it will be the thing that lasts longest, I mean, I think it's probably like 1 million years before glass breaks down. Yeah. And then you have to think of actual glass in use. I think the trouble with a lot of these environmental things and people having knee-jerk reactions and we must replace, plastic coffee cups with these different types of coffee cups, it's looking at the whole impact of them, from their manufacture to their transport and their use and their disposal. And of course, glass, the manufacture of glass is incredibly energy hungry. Transport of glass, it's really heavy compared to plastic, so you're producing a lot more emissions transporting it around. Obviously, you know, a lot of producers don't like it because it's of the breakage and everything else. So
but it's recyclable.
It is recyclable, but
that's one sort of thing. But that
it is recyclable.
But that can also be used to sort of. Sometimes these benefits can be like used as like selling points to sort of like now I've noticed there's this big push of like, oh, we're making roads out of plastic now, and oh, we're making houses out of plastic, collect all these and it's almost everyone's like, yeah, it's great. And it's like in a way it's like, yeah, like we could use up all the plastic we've got left, but let's not use it as an excuse to continue producing millions of tons of it.
I think there's a real lack of knowledge among the public, which is completely understandable. You know, it's completely natural to think if you're putting out your glass bottles in the recycling that they're going to be recycled into more glass bottles, but they're not.
Oh, really?
They're just smashed up into aggregate, which is used in road surfacing.
Oh, really?
So glass bottles are made from new glass. Plastic bottles are made from new plastic. Your plastic bottles do not make more plastic bottles. They get downcycled into fleece or carpet tiles or something like that.
Oh, really?
But they're not making more plastic bottles, so it's not a closed loop at all. It's just sort of postponing the inevitable because those things aren't going to be recycled at the end of their lifetime.
Oh, right. So it's like repurposing, really, they should call it.
Yeah.
Because a cycle would suggest that it's like coming back round to its initial, you know, but it's not cyclic, is it? It's kind of like...
And unless it is that, it's pointless.
Yeah.
You know, because you're just continuously creating this demand for more stuff.
You're making more products.
Yeah, you know, and that shouldn't be seen as being the answer. The answer should be looking at, do we actually need any of that stuff in the first place? You know, I'm not inherently anti-plastic. You know, I think plastic is an amazing material. If you look around us, most of what we've got around us is made of some form of plastic.
Yeah.
And obviously it's transformed our lives in many ways. You look at heart valves in heart surgery or the components of cars. You know, cars are half as light as they used to be, or half as heavy as they used to be. Yeah. Which is all really good, but it's the fact that we're using over half of the plastic we make to make single-use items we're going to use for 10 minutes and throw away. Yeah. It's mad.
Yeah. God. That's like a good amount of information. I just learnt a fair bit there. I had no idea about that. So like, are you aware of like, you said a minute ago when we were talking that like you see these little pockets of groups doing similar things around? Are you aware of any more, like off the top of your head, of people who are doing this
doing similar sort of stuff to us? Masses. There's so many around Cornwall. I mean, Cornwall really is like this sort of beacon. It's like this green beacon for the country. I think possibly because we do get a lot more than our fair share of the marine debris, because obviously we're
that was another question I had for you, actually.
First landfall from the Atlantic, so, and obviously the current's all coming this way. You know, some of the stuff will be locally generated, but we know that a lot of what we get actually comes across from America and Canada.
Really?
Yeah, so we get quite a lot of in North America and Canada, lobster fishermen have to use a special type of plastic tag to put on their lobster pots, and they have stamped marker buoys on their lobster pots, and these quite often wash up, and they have the date of the license. Sometimes they even have the fisherman's name and phone number. You can ring them up and say, I found your whatever it was. And we get natural debris as well, so we get sea beans, which are like the seed pods of tropical vines that come across in the Caribbean. So you can see that stuff is clearly coming across.
Wow.
So that's the identifiable stuff. We don't know how much of the unidentifiable stuff is from that far away as well. Yeah. We get lots of stuff from shipping and the fishing boats, and, you know, we've just got the big shipping lanes
That's
offshore.
Quite a big one, isn't it? Like, that's like a good big contributor. I was just reading on a Facebook thread. There seems to be a bit of a, like, political rub with the fishermen, with, like, the netting and stuff. Yeah. They don't seem too happy with the kind of... with, you know, the criticism of it in a way, which I can understand from some point of view, but also I kind of feel that, like, you know, it's in everyone's interest to come up with a solution.
If this was an interview that was going out in a widely read newspaper or something, I wouldn't be able to say this, but because I'm just talking to you, I can tell the truth. So I don't know what the situation is in the rest of the country, but I would say 70 to 80% of the plastic waste that we pick up on our beaches is fishing related.
Wow.
And when you think that this is a tiny industry, its contribution to our economy is minimal. There's 11,000 fishermen in our country.
Yeah.
And it can't be right that they're producing such an enormous amount of this problem.
But then could the fish that's from this country, but then a lot of that waste is coming from abroad, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, do we? It could be, the immediate reaction from the fishermen.
Do they say, oh, it's not us?
Oh, yeah, it's the Spanish, it's the French. You know, I mean, I hope they're right, and that after Brexit, we won't be getting any of this stuff washing up.
Because they come and fish in British waters, do they?
Yeah,
the
they
Spanish
do.
And French and whatnot.
They have the right to. So as
Okay.
British fishermen have the right to fish in certain places. I've been doing quite a bit of reading about this recently, and I've been quite surprised to find out. I had no idea that British fishermen have actually the second largest quota in the whole EU.
Okay.
Which seems incredible. And I just think,
considering our size or population.
Considering our size and the fact that all we hear about is how, the French fishermen are coming over here and raping our waters, and actually they have a smaller catch than we do.
Yeah.
And when you think that France and Spain are the biggest markets for British fish, it does all seem a little bit wonky.
Yeah. I suppose you can spin anything, can't you?
Yeah, you
I suppose
can.
the thing they might say is that, but that's what they're saying. They'll probably suggest there's a big black market or something.
Oh, for sure, But I think we've kind of got into this thing where the fishermen are viewed as heroes, sort of on a par with the military,
Yeah.
And of course they do a really, really tough job.
It's quite romantic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's quite you can see why it's, because it's a bit of a throwback as well, isn't it? Because it's a dying thing. It's got a patriotic kind of thing to it. And even though I'm kind of against it as a vegan, I don't think it's very good at all. But fair play to them, they're doing something.
But I think there's something in all of us, that we sort of have this sort of romantic attachment to these sort of dying
me too,
things. And, with the march of globalisation, all these old trades that are disappearing, and people who still have the knowledge and the resources to be able to go out and actually have a job that's sort of totally just one step away from the natural world, I think is fantastic.
You're right.
For most of us who spend our whole time behind laptops and living virtually,
in a team of guys or girls, but I can definitely see the appeal. It's supposed to be a very hard job, isn't it? It's supposed to be very grueling, physical.
God, I think it is.
Out in the wind and rain and
incredible
bobbing
hours,
around.
really scary, dangerous conditions. And I can understand. Obviously, working on a fishing boat is not a stable platform. It's inevitable that you're going to get things being lost over the side.
Yeah.
And that is understandable. But the majority of what we pick up is cut off bits of trawl net. So when nets are broken, trawling, you're trawling a net along the bottom, it's going to get snagged on rocks and wrecks, and sometimes the nets have to be cut away because it's going to pose a danger to the boat. And often the nets are damaged and have to be fixed. It's all these little cut off bits. I've picked up about 4,000 of those bits just over the Christmas holidays.
Whoa.
Just on Tregenhawk and Tregantle. And if you put all those bits, I'm sure you could easily think, it's just nothing, just a tiny bit of net. But when you add them all together, and their propensity to sort of break down and form, and break down into microplastics.
Yeah.
It's so unnecessary. So I hope in the next few weeks we're going to be doing some talking with some fishermen's associations and harbour masters, and sort of looking at how and where the nets are mended, and can their sort of waste disposal be improved.
Yeah.
And there are loads of fishermen who are doing fantastic stuff. They're working with the Fishing for Litter scheme. So when they pull up their trawls and they pull up a lot of the sinking type of plastics, they have dumpy bags and they can bring those back to shore and dispose of them. I think many fishermen have drastically changed and improved their practices, and like you say, a lot of this stuff could be coming from other countries. It could be very old, it could be 30 or 40 years old, but nevertheless the majority of what is on the beaches is from the fishing industry, and hopefully things are going to change.
Microplastics, what is microplastic exactly? Is it broken down plastic, or is it actually micro beads and produced to be very small for, do you know what I mean? 'Cause there is that as well.
So microplastic is a term that's given to any piece of plastic that's under 5 millimeters wide.
Okay.
Basically. So it could be either. So actually the majority of numerically of the things that you find on some beaches, like trigantal. This is something I find absolutely fascinating. So the sea salt stuff, so you don't get everything washing up in every place. So like where you get a fine sandy beach or a coarse shingly beach, on that fine sandy beach you'll get much more of the microplastics and the lighter floating things, and on the shingly beaches you'll often get the much sort of more dense, harder sinking plastics, and so like Pelorn you'll get a lot of cable ties and really old bits of fabric and bottlenecks and all sorts of things.
Is that because they grab and get stuck, and then they kind of, as the sea would wash it back out potentially, they get snagged?
I think
maybe
the sinking stuff goes down and gets all sort of tangled up in the kelp beds.
Okay.
And then you'll have like a big storm that rips all the kelp out and washes it up on shore, and it all comes up with it. So there, you'll get really old stuff like until about the 70s, that area was used as a dump site for solid waste from the dockyard. So you get all these really old, sort of engine filters and solid electric cables.
What were they doing?
I know.
What were they up
There's
to?
actually a trench offshore there that's still just full of all this stuff.
Oh my God.
You get a lot of coal from the wreck of the Rose Hill.
Unforgivable, actually, isn't it?
I know. It's important not to let yourself get too down about it, because we have created such a huge mess in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
And we can't undo that. But we can try to make things less bad in future, because if we don't do something, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse,
How do you keep motivated, like when it's, you can clean the beach, and I'm sure it's not like when you clean like a house and you can see the house is now clean. It's like, because the tide's coming in and with it comes more plastic. Like, how do you keep yourself like in a positive headspace when it's...
Well, I think at the beginning, so we set up Rame Peninsula Beach Care in 2013, and things were pretty bad then. And I never thought we'd still be going 6 years later and still getting sort of, 50, 60, sometimes 100 people down on the beach every month to come and clean up. I just thought it would be a sort of kind of flash in the pan thing, and that people would be enthusiastic for a bit and then tail off. But talking about that, I did think, well, God, what is the point really? Because it's all just washing in again on the next tide. But actually over time, I think we have made an impact in this area, which seems crazy, but you can see it when you really focus on particular items. So we did a thing a couple of years ago where we worked with some other beach cleaning groups around Cornwall. This was around the time when people were starting to talk about bringing in a deposit scheme on plastic bottles. So we thought, what could we make that will sort of add in some way to this campaign? So we decided to just focus on plastic bottle tops. And over 3 months of the winter, we were all just like out the whole time picking up every plastic bottle top we could find. In 3 months, and this is just some beaches in Cornwall, we picked up 65,000 bottle tops.
God.
And there was this amazing guy who sadly is no longer with us, but he used to work doing shifts in a meat packing factory. And so he was really used to shift work. He was suffering from cancer at the time and could no longer get down to do beach cleaning. So he pulled shifts in his garage, stringing all these bottle tops together, and he made it into a chain that was 1.1 kilometres long.
Oh my God.
Which we had this crazy day with hundreds and hundreds of people where we walked it all the way down onto Tregenhawk Beach.
Yeah.
And
took it back down.
Well, we still use it. We've given half of it to a big organisation that use it in all sorts of big exhibitions at XL and Royal Geographical Society and stuff. Yeah. And we've got the other half in our container down here in the boatyard in Millbrook. And we've used it so much in public awareness events. And it really, good, speaks to people.
Stimulation.
Because it's not, oh, that's from fishermen or that's from somebody else. It's like, oh my God, this is stuff we're all using every day. But the point is that since we did that, suddenly we realised how few bottle tops we pick up now. And it makes you see, of course, this stuff has been slooshing around for decades probably, and you take it out of the system and it's not all just coming back in again on the next tide. So it does have an impact.
Good.
Same thing with shotgun wadding. At the beginning, this is like the inside part of a shotgun cartridge, and we used to pick up thousands. I can remember one day at Tregantal picking up 741 of them.
Whoa.
Which we think, partly will have been coming over from Canada because they have this massive annual hunt of seabirds off boats there. They shoot hundreds and thousands of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And but again, don't really pick up that many of them anymore.
No.
So it's actually quite slow, the incoming nature
that's
of
just
it.
been building up
It's
over
just
years of them
builds
doing
up.
it. God.
Might get washed back out again, but then it comes back in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been quite positive. On the microplastics, so what I was just going to say was, part of them are the smashed up remains of other things. But we have a really big problem here, especially at Tregantle, which is a microplastics beach, with the nurdles. So nurdles they're the pellets. They're the sort of feedstock for the plastics industry. And this is another thing that really gets my goat, because, the British Plastics Federation will say, marine plastic, nobody wants it to end up in the sea. It's such a shame, but it's just irresponsible consumers,
Oh, I see. Yeah, passing the buck.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
But in fact, on Tregantle, you can go down there, especially sort of late winter, springtime, and you can have, the beach looks like it's covered in confetti. You can walk for miles, and it's just this sort of metre wide tide line of all these little coloured pellets.
Oh my God.
It's estimated that the plastics industry loses about 53 billion every year in the UK.
Where do they come from? Sorry, these little pellets.
So this is how all our plastic stuff starts its life. As pellets,
right, yeah.
And they're melted down, and then they're just sort of formed into whatever, your bottle or your sunglasses or your laptop cover or whatever it's going to be. And because they're so tiny, they just, you split a bag, they get on the floor, they go down the drain. There's really simple
but how
things.
does the drain? Are there still drains heading out into the ocean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a thing. There's a lot of human waste and stuff, and just drains.
No.
There?
So I mean, all drains go back into a sewage treatment works. Even all the surface water off roads, it all goes via a sewage treatment works, unless you're in a storm situation when there's too much water and it just goes straight into the river.
Yeah, but then how is it that this volume of nurdles, like microplastics, is coming from industry straight into the? Because that's bypassing the consumer, because it's pre-production.
It's pre-production.
So how is that ending up on the beaches? Does anyone know?
Well, it'll be either that
Stored.
they're lost from factories.
Yeah.
They will go through a sewage treatment works, but those sewage treatment works aren't designed with meshes small enough to trap that kind of thing. So they'll just go straight through. They're tiny.
Wow.
And also a lot of them could be lost in transit. We know there's been a few cases where, obviously all our stuff is brought to us by container ship, isn't it?
Of course, if a container ship goes, then
I don't know if you've ever seen these pictures of container ships, how they are. You have these 20 or 40 foot long massive containers stacked, maybe 10 high. They hit a freak wave or a storm, and they can just lose dozens of them.
Really? Oh
so one container of nurdles, they're shipped on pallets in plastic sacks, and there'll be trillions of them in a container. And those sacks will split open before long,
God.
And when you think about how exponentially our plastic production is going to rise over the next, decade even, I think it's going to more than double. It's quite scary stuff.
God, is that like? Do you know that for sure that it's only going to increase? Because it seems like everyone's kind of wanting to turn away from it. It seems like like how veganism like 10 years ago was extremely fringe and very much like kind of like culturally sort of like outside, and now I notice like even people who I would have thought like now people who even a couple of years ago who I thought would never listen to it are seeing it, because they're connecting the dots finally. There's too many dots around that the shape of it's emerging, like health, all these different things, the animals, like all the environment, it's all coming together into this kind of picture that they're now seeing.
And the human health as well.
And I would have never have thought that, but it's becoming so obvious, like that, and especially with the environment, it seems like plastics are like gonna be there like pretty soon. Because have you heard about just slightly to the side, have you heard about microplastics being in us? Yeah, because that's like a big deal now. Like that's potentially, like, I only heard about this the other day. I saw a YouTuber that I watch. He had he's had really bad health for a long time for various reasons, and he had a blood filtering thing done in Germany where they take blood from you and then put it back in you basically, and they run it through a plastic filter.
Yeah.
But what they taken out at the bottom was all like microplastics straight out of his bloodstream.
sure it wasn't off the plastic filter.
No, they said because it went away for testing and stuff, and the doctors, and it was plastic, so that's actually ending up like inside of us. So I wonder whether, when eventually all these things catch up and they catch on, whether it will be like, okay, we have to stop this nonsense now, or.
I think ultimately it's going to be when, and sadly that might be too late, when you can actually prove the impact on human health. That's going to be when the world really wakes up to it. You know, they found microplastics in rainwater, in salt, in tap water. I mean, we can't get away with it. If you eat a kilo of mussels, you're getting about 11,000 microplastic fragments in there.
Good Lord.
It's extraordinary. It's been found locked in Antarctic ice, Arctic ice, plastics down at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, which is 7 miles deep. It's everywhere. And to think that we've done this in 60 years, it's just mind-blowing, isn't it?
Good Lord.
And I think now they're sort of wondering, in fact, you know, when you get down to a really sort of nano size of microplastic particle, looking at whether that's even capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier.
Oh no.
You know, it's pretty scary stuff. But then if it is it actually doing any harm? You know, we don't know. I think
there is that.
A whole other aspect of the plastic
I'm sure
stuff.
It can't be great.
It can't be great,
but
no.
If it's going to be that small a thing, then maybe it's negligible anyway.
The thing is, you've got the physical impacts of plastic. So obviously when animals are ingesting it, you know, and you'll have seen those photos of the albatross on Midway Island in the Pacific, you know, where the parents are feeding their chicks plastic and they're just getting completely filled up with plastic and until they die and the corpse just rots away and you're left with this little pile of plastic that just is still perfect and is re-released to, you know, bung up the next chick. You know, massive impacts on wildlife. So it's estimated that 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine mammals are being killed by plastic every year in the sea. Whoa. which is crazy. But it's not just those physical impacts. It's the fact that because plastic is made from oil, it's a fat. And we, alongside sort of plastic production, also started to make a huge range of persistent organic pollutants, flame retardants, PCBs, DDT, all these awful things with really scary side effects, most of which were banned decades ago. But they persist in the environment. So they're still out there. They're still in our rivers and our sediment and our seawater. But they much prefer to attach to something fatty. So you can find, we've actually done tests on with a lab in Japan of microplastics from Dragantle, and the levels of these things attached to the surface of the plastics is drastically higher than it is in the seawater.
The level of what attached to them, sorry?
The persistent organic pollutants. So all these long band chemicals.
Right. They're attaching to the plastics
will attach
as well.
To the plastic because they're lipophilic. They want to be on fat.
It's like a horror movie.
It is.
And it's like they're alive. They're coming for us.
And so then, you know, when wildlife or arguably humans are consuming these plastics, it's not necessarily the plastic that's the problem because, you know, they found that 1/3 of the fish being landed at Plymouth have plastics inside their guts, and people say, well, it doesn't matter, it's in the gut, you know, we're not going to eat that. But the problem is that those chemicals that are attached to the plastic, or which were originally additives in the plastic, because they want to be on fat, they quite like the plastic, but they prefer body fat, and they can leach out into the body fats of those animals. And so we're eating that, you know. And so plastic's almost like a sort of vector for a lot of other things that it can introduce into organisms. So really good example of this. We have one pod of killer whales left in the UK off the west coast of Scotland. They've been studied since, I think, about the 1970s. And in all that time, they've never produced a calf. So they are the walking dead. They're on their way out. And one of them was found dead. She'd been entangled in crab pot ropes and she washed up a couple of years ago. And when they tested her blubber, the levels of PCBs in that blubber were over 100 times the safe maximum level. And of course, one of the impacts of PCBs is infertility.
Oh, of course.
So
that's so sad. And
because they're apex predators, you know, they're getting this biomagnification of these chemicals all the way up through the food chain.
Oh no.
I know.
So, like, why is it that then why is nobody listening? Why are we not changing? And why is it that, like,
You can say that about lots of things. Look at climate change. You know, we've
Yeah.
at the most conservative estimates, we've got 12 years left to get something done, and we're all just like, oh, that's quite scary. Let's go shopping. You know,
Yeah. Switch to vegan cheese.
like you say. I mean, I think in our part of the world, I think especially with plastics, because I think it's something so visible and it's something so unnecessary and it's something easy for people to get angry about. I think people are really waking up to that. But then you have to look at China and India and the whole of the rest of the world where, you know, and that's not to say that people don't care in those places. I mean, I think there are some amazing... What really annoys me is when people are like, oh, all those filthy countries overseas. You know, there's some incredible people who are fighting against much greater odds in India and Indonesia and stuff, who are really doing amazing stuff on plastics. You know, I'm sure you've heard of Afro Shah in India.
Is that the beach in Mumbai?
Yeah.
Cleaned? Yeah. You
know, like one guy on his own starting to clean a beach, which anybody else would have been like, oh, well, that's, you know, too far gone. And they've got turtles nesting there again now, haven't they?
Yeah, that's amazing. The
is
before
amazing.
and after shots of that are incredible. That's an amazing achievement, isn't it? So there is hope.
I think there's definitely hope. But it's, you know... You look at how our population's going to grow just in the next sort of 30, 40 years.
But that's an interesting point, because it wasn't last year the first year that the population didn't actually grow in Great Britain? Didn't more people pass away than were born last year?
That's probably true here.
Yeah.
But I think as a global population, that's not going to be the case, is it? I think, you know, when my parents were born, there were only 2 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
And what are we now, nearly at 8 or something?
Yeah.
You know.
That's what they say. Like, I know it's in a crazy number to even think of 8 billion, and I'm not like... I've run through that in my head a few times, and it's hard for me to imagine how we can go from 2 to 8 in that short amount of time, because when you think about it, like, for the populations to increase, you have to have more than 2 children. Yeah. Everyone has to have more than not everyone, but more than, you know, half the people or whatever have to have more than 2 children. But even if that's the case, that only maintains it. Do you know what I mean? That only keeps it steady. And you're seeing so much, like, I know that there's like the third world and everywhere else, but it does just seem like that's just such a ginormous leap in that amount of time. I mean, maybe that is the case. Third world, people having more kids and that being exponential. Like, maybe that is it. But
I think it's been, like you say, if you look at countries in the West, you know, Japan's population is declining, isn't it? You know, I think the more developed countries, populations aren't really rising, or they're rising very, very slowly. I suppose it's countries where until so recently probably the life expectancy would have been incredibly short, and now, you know, as sort of you know, better medical assistance arrives and vaccinations and better food security, and, you know, as conditions are improving in a lot of those countries, and you probably have a lag where it's been traditional to have 5, 6, 7 children, and sort of in anticipating possibly that some of them won't make it, you know, but most of them are now. You know, I suppose there's going to be a period of time where the population continues to grow until that sort of fertility rate goes down. Yeah.
Well, maybe this DDT, what is it?
DDT.
Maybe that will play a part in it. Who knows?
Oh.
Like, what's the, do you guys get, because you've been going a long time, do you get support from the government and everything? Have you had any kind of support?
Funding?
Well, yeah, funding, or like...
Yeah, we have. We got some lottery funding the first year, and we got some EU funding the first year.
Yeah.
Personally, I find the funding quite difficult. It's quite onerous and time consuming doing all the applications, and actually in the end we don't have a lot of costs, and we get some private donations. We raise quite a lot each year through coffee mornings and different events like that, and that's sort of enough to keep us ticking along, and I feel in a way helps keep you more genuine as well, and just sort of do what you want to do as a group, because often when you get funding, the funders have a very clear sort of parameters of what it is that they're looking to fund, and so you end up having to sort of, you know, contort your aims into what they want to fund, and then you're sort of ticking their boxes, and it doesn't, you know, it takes you away from the essence of what you were trying to do in the first place.
That's interesting. It's kind of like the whole thing of money, it just has that aspect to it when you apply it to almost anything. Like as soon as money comes into something, you instantly have to sacrifice some kind of element of your authenticity or something like that, where it comes to like art, or whether it comes to media or like any kind of career, like you're always selling out.
Well,
like it's quite
we live in a capitalist consumerist system and we all need money to survive, and
but what you know, like, it's what I really like about like this conversation is that, like, you saying that there's all sorts of these little pockets of community kind of groups sort of coming up, especially in the south, and it seems like that, I mean, that for me is definitely the future, because it is about responsibility. When it, like, in my opinion, it's like people don't want responsibility, so they're happy for the government to just do whatever they want, even at the cost of their own wealth. Like, they're happy for the government just to make decisions, and it's like, okay, they'll deal with it, we don't have to be engaged in it. But actually, like, you guys, you've gone down there, you've taken responsibility for your local place, you're like, and taken on other people's like responsibilities, cleaning up other people's mess. And it's like, that to me is like really empowering, and that's kind of like the essence of like where we should be. Like, I am like an anarchist in that regard. Like, I don't feel like, but not in a way that's like, oh, let's do whatever we want whenever we want. It's like, let's be like personally responsible for more than like more stuff or everything. Let's like take responsibility completely for our lives. The government shouldn't really be getting involved in everything. Like, it's quite a, I don't know, and the fact that you say there's a lot of other groups doing that, to me, if that keeps happening, I think that's the real like revolution, in my opinion. And if that can become part of our culture, like, again, that would be amazing, I think.
I agree, and I don't really agree with you that people don't want to take responsibility. I think it's that people don't know how to take responsibility, and don't have the feel that they have the power to. And I mean, I know this is only a tiny thing, a tiny part of a big issue, but I've been so blown away really by the response we've had through Rame Peninsula Beach Care, just seeing how many people keep coming back again and again and again. I think I was saying before, we obviously live in a world full of very scary big environmental issues that we don't know what we can do about as individuals or how we can help. But when it's something really localised to your area, and we all love where we live, and it's kind of an empowering thing, being able to get down and actually physically put your hands on the thing that is the problem. And even though we will never completely clean the beaches or the seas, just thinking every single bit of plastic that you remove is one bit less that's out there to do harm. That in 1,000 years maybe will have killed something, and it's not going to this time.
Wow.
And it's also become a real sort of social cohesion thing, I think. You get to spend a couple of hours on the beach. That's all you're doing, and you're doing it with like-minded people, and we're all bouncing ideas off each other and encouraging each other to keep going. And it's a really kind of beautiful thing.
Nice.
And I was down on Tregantle Beach on Christmas Day, and I walked down there, and it's not because of us particularly. I think it's because it's becoming such a mainstream thing, but everybody down there had a bag and was picking up plastic.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I think as soon as other people can see more people doing it, then it gives them the permission to think, oh, it's okay, I can do that as well, and it will make a difference because I'm not on my own. So I also co-coordinate something called the Cornish Plastic Pollution Coalition, and we're a group now of over 50 organisations around Cornwall, and most of them, they're sort of marine conservation or beach cleaning groups like us, but there's all sorts of other things like Truro Cathedral and all sorts of some of the transition groups, and we come together twice a year and all support each other in our individual campaigns, and that's had a massive impact. The pace of change in Cornwall on many levels is, and the number of campaigns that have started off here is massive compared to other parts of the country, and the impact that we're having on the council. The county council has said that it's going to go single-use plastic free. So there's lots of really cool stuff happening.
Is that Carradon Council have said that?
Cornwall Council, there's no Carradon anymore.
Oh, really?
That was when we still had district councils, so now we've only got the county council.
Oh, I see.
So I think, you see stuff like that building, and it's like a snowball effect, and I think that does make me feel really hopeful.
Yeah.
And similarly, like with the Extinction Rebellion movement, that started off really small, and you thought, And then, you know, within a few weeks, you know, I went to a meeting the other night and there were over 60 people there, you know, all from all tiny villages and walks of life all around our sort of local part of Cornwall, you know, who are prepared to actually sacrifice their liberty to, you know, get something done about climate change. So I think as soon as there is an avenue and people can see that there's some way that they can get involved that isn't just them on their own, then they do want to take responsibility.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a really nice place to leave it, actually.
Sure.
I think that's like, I mean, we can keep having a chat and like see where it goes, but that's like maybe a really nice place to leave it on the edit. I don't know.
Okay, that's good, because I think that was my kids calling me.
Was it?
I could just feel my phone going. So.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say thanks so much for like doing this. I really appreciate it. Like, it's the first time I've ever done this, and it's been really cool. And you've been amazing. Like,
no, it was great. It was really nice to speak to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Cheers.